Take a deep Jim Carrey-esque breath.
Okay.
Oh, man.
Alrighty then. All right.
Wow, with that mustache, you really pulled that off. Actually, that was good, Zach.
All right, here we go. Welcome back to Cereal for Lunch, the podcast that is leaner than your post-layoff ops team and spicier than the Slack thread about it. I am your host, Zach, Clean Up the Cap Table Oats, joined, as always, by Scott Spreadsheet Smith, Brandon Branddeal Wright, Brett Break-Even Larson, and Chad Never On Time Ingram. We are excited to talk about today's menu, which is, first of all, we're going to talk about how there's layoffs everywhere. AI isn't just taking jobs, it's writing the severance emails. Small teams are the future. 200-person go-to-market teams are out. Lean, mean, PLG machines are in. And Trump's big, beautiful bill, not to be confused, Chad, with the BBB that you're used to, which is the big, beautiful, anyway.
Going on?
That you may have been on before you were married. But anyway, so we're going to get into all of that. But to start off, let's jump into founder therapy. And since we're picking on Chad, we're going to start with you on this one.
Oh, no.
I went through the archives of all of our podcasts that we've done, and I'm like, what is a theme that Chad has really enjoyed talking about? And let's kick off this founder therapy for you.
Them.
How do you fire people? How do you know? Truly, though, like, let's say
I thought we were going to talk about racing. Dang it.
No.
Okay. All right.
The other
All right.
adrenaline-inducing event. So as you are, how do you know when it's time to let someone go? And what do you do if you like really, really like them?
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one. Okay, so first off, I'll say that it's not a science. It's an art. There's no formula for it, and you really have to follow your gut, which is a really crappy answer because I know people really like to say, tell me when to fire somebody. And the truth is that just like, going back to all the dating jokes we've had in this podcast, given that especially none of us have dated in like over a decade,
Hopefully.
Maybe Zach.
Yeah, hopefully. And so anyway, but it's the same idea. When you know. So, I think that with anybody, you should be like, I like to look at principles rather than tactics in these sort of things. And the principle is that when the business wins, everyone wins. And that it's up to the leader to sort of protect and maintain that. And so that means that you must be, almost maniacally focused on the business's success. And that also means in order to achieve that you need to have the best people possible. And how everyone defines the best person is different. And there are some people that, just like in distro, actually, that score really well for one company and don't for another. There's people that fit one role and don't fit another role. And I think that's for everyone to find out. So you really need to be, slow to hire in a sense and quick to fire. And that, I think, protects your culture. The other thing is that you're less likely.
I like that whole concept of not just protect the business, but protect the culture.
Yeah, definitely. Because here's the thing. The culture is its own sort of freight train. Like it's this living, breathing thing. And once it starts moving, you kind of can't even stop it as a leader. Even a small layoff might only be a blip to the whole group, right? Like everyone's still feeling good. They're still understanding the pressure. They're still like inducing it upon themselves, and everything's moving, well. So the thing is this, though, it becomes more obvious, and the feeling in your gut becomes more obvious when you have a very well-defined culture. And we could talk and define what that means, but a really, really defined culture, and everyone is participating in it. So the person who's not performing sticks out quite literally like a very, very sore thumb. And so it is very obvious. So I think I've heard Brett say this, and I've said it in the past, where the business is they're either pushing the business or the business is pushing them. And if you find somebody who is constantly sort of being like pulled along, that's an obvious person who's not going to fit. So that's kind of maybe describing that a little bit. The other challenge, I think, is somebody that you really like. I think this is just inherently difficult. So there's a couple things here. The first thing that comes to mind is that a lot of times people will say, okay, we like so-and-so, they're a culture fit. This is very important to make like a really hard line here. A culture fit, really in your culture as a company, you really need to define like what that culture is and what it means and what the vision is, because a lot of times people will put that in as a counterfeit. It's a counterfeit. Oh, we like them, so they're a culture fit. Just because you like them doesn't mean they're a culture fit. A culture fit should be a performer. You have a culture of performance. And so they're not a culture fit. You like them, and guess what? Turns out you can still go hang out with them tonight, or tomorrow, or go to lunch with them, but they're just not a fit.
They're probably not going to want to hang out with you tonight.
Yeah,
right. But
maybe not with you, but your company. Yeah.
What do you think, Brett? I think you run a company with the most amount of employees. Well, actually, no. Maybe Chad. Jump.
No, I think Brett had more. Most we had was about 90. I think Brett had one something.
160, 170.
Yeah.
I think the mistake I made at eVisit was confusing liking them with them being a good culture fit, to Chad's point. And I think the real trick is getting super transparent with everyone that you have a performance culture and I like everyone, but we have to objectively understand, are you pushing the business or is the business pushing you? And if we have a good culture fit by values, I have a general rule that we will try to find another seat on the bus once. So it's always like, don't hire for culture. But I also think like every time I mishired, and I take like if you're firing someone, they have a responsibility to perform, but it's ultimately like on you that you brought them into the business. I found that the mistake I generally made was mishiring the skill set. Meaning it was almost never a culture fit mishire. I can think of 2 or 3 times where it's like, oh, we got that totally wrong. It was almost always like, we need something built and we hired a manager. We need something built and we hired a scaler. We need something, and I think you have general approaches to your people. Like at eVisit, because of our stage, my experience and our like funding up until like our Series A, we typically hired low experience, high potential individuals. And we evolved into high experience, hungry, and capable. And so I think Chad's right, it's an art, but if you can turn that into a science, and mine was, if I find myself thinking about that person because of their lack of performance, or I find myself consistently frustrated because I'm not getting what I need, then I know it's time. And the cycle of that has become shorter. Like I can find that like, oh, this person's been on my mind, over and over again for the last couple of weeks. And I either haven't done the job of sitting down and discussing that with them, or I have and it hasn't changed. Then I know we're probably headed to that.
But that's your gut, right? Like those things you just identified are symptoms of like what your gut feeling is. And your gut feeling is, hey, this isn't working. And like, okay, ask yourself this, how many times? How many times have you let somebody go and said, always the litmus test, I'll let them go. How do I feel about it? Good.
Relieved.
Like in most cases, in fact, I don't even know if I've regretted letting somebody go ever. And it's like, so if you have these feelings, but frequently, how often have you felt I let them go too late?
Never.
Yeah.
Never. But I think your gut, I don't know, I tell myself a story all the time where I'm like, oh, maybe they can get there. Maybe they can.
But I will tell you this, Brett. Like there are things where, now we have put dozens of people on PIPs at Ovation, right? And one person has really clawed back from that PIP, right? And they're doing great now. But it was like, it took me like sitting down and being like, you either are going to get fired or you're going to improve. And like, there's no, I want to be very clear with you because you deserve it, right? And they started performing. And I think that's the frustrating thing, is that there are times that you get that feeling. And I think that you can either have a very clear conversation with them if you want them to get better, or if you realize it's just not working out, then just cut ties. I mean, we hired someone, and within 3 weeks we let them go, because it was like so clear that it was just not a culture fit, like not even worth finding a new role for them. It was like, let's just let you go. But I love what you said, Brett, about making sure that if you've done the work to hire someone because they're great, maybe they're in the wrong role. Like, for example, we had an employee, we brought this person in, and they crushed it. I mean, like, they got this, every month we have it's called a standing ovation. That's like, the employee of the month type thing. And they were up for it like 3 months, and they got it one of the months. And then we switched them to a different role because that role that they were doing was no longer needed. And they literally became one of the worst employees at Ovation, like to the point that we were talking about letting them go. And we were like, okay, before we let them go, let's switch them back into a role that was more similar to the one they were doing before. And now this person is back getting nominated every couple months for being the employee of the month. And so I love the fact it's not just the people or the process. Sometimes it's the role of the person in the process.
That's a good one. And sorry, I keep dominating, but I think this is interesting. Like, I haven't experienced, I have experienced many times in the past where we took somebody who wasn't performing, but we really liked them. They were a culture fit, which to me, I believe is a counterfeit. They weren't performing. And then so we laterally moved them into another role where they might be a better fit. And in many cases, it didn't work. I think there were some where it did, but many it didn't.
Yeah, totally.
One of the things I'm thinking about.
Oh, go
sorry,
ahead, Scott.
One of the things I was thinking about as we're talking is, like, I think there's two aspects of this that I really resonate with this. One is, I think when your team is smaller, we're talking about feeling and almost like vibes. Like you got the vibe on this person when the team is small, and as the company gets bigger, I feel like you have to either trust that the people around you are going to have that same feeling and the same vibes to kind of reflect how you are, or you actually have to just, you start to define what these things mean. So like for us, as we went from, again, it's not significant, but like from 5 to 20 and then 20 to 50, we adopted this program called Entrepreneur Operating System. And they have this concept of right people, right seats. So right people is defining the values. And then you say, like, are they always living the values sometimes or rarely? And then you just kind of keep track of that. And then the right seats is you actually define the job and the role fit, kind of similar to what Brett's describing. And do they get the job? Do they really want it? And do they have the capacity to do it? And you have to kind of reflect all of these things and figure out, like, are they in the right seat? And if they're not, find the right seat. And if they're the right person, and if they're not the right person. So I think you have some principles that you can define and follow after the whole, like, vibe situation that you maybe initially start with.
So yesterday,
Brandon,
yesterday Zach asked me a hypothetical question that I think, if you apply it to this situation, is really interesting, right? So if you were brought in as an outside CEO into your company at this exact stage with this salary, with this amount of equity, what would you do differently, right? Instead of, like, because I feel like we all have this baggage. We've been here. We act a certain way in our roles. People know us a certain way. It's hard to change that a little bit. It's hard to, like, you've been doing things, all the history. So it's like, well, they were a really good employee. But if you kind of tweak the thinking, I think it's an interesting mental exercise to go through when you're thinking about, should I keep this person on? Well, if you were a brand new CEO coming into this company and trying to do X with the company, would you keep them? Like, based on what you know about them right now, would they stay on, or would you let them go? And might be an interesting hypothetical exercise to walk through when thinking about letting someone go or not.
Yeah. Well, speaking of letting go, I want to move on from this conversation, but I know this has been, I love this, and I think that this is a really good frameworks for any founder at any stage to really think through. And I think the last piece of advice that I would give on this is that you are not held hostage to anyone. This is something where at times I have been afraid to let people go because I can't let that person go. They know too much about the product. I can't let that person go. They're too good. They know too many people in the market. They're like, their sales skills are too good. Whatever the case is, like, you are not held hostage to anyone. And so if you're not firing someone because you're afraid of firing them, you're probably going about it the wrong way. So anyway, that would be the last piece of advice, because I wish I had heard that much earlier in my career. All right, on to the next segment, group chat, hypes and headlines, where we scroll through Twitter so you don't have to. Topic number 1. Let's talk about layoffs, baby, since let's keep that happy train rolling. I mean, it's a Friday, so why not? Well, by the time they're listening to this, it'll be a Friday. Layoffs are back with a vengeance, and this time the justifications are AI efficiencies. Microsoft cut 9,000. Meta slashed across Reality Labs. Salesforce quietly dropped 1,000 people in go-to-market. And even Bumble cut 240, but I think they call it breakups over there. I'm kidding, they don't. But that was a good one. All right, these aren't just cleanups. This is like restructuring around the AI native workflows. And even solid teams are vulnerable if they're not built for speed and margin. So looking at what does this mean for us? What does this mean for what we're doing here? Should we be ready for layoffs? And keep in mind, we're talking about small teams next.
Yeah, I think your point is about restructuring is really important, right? So yes, there are a lot of layoffs happening, but it's not like a lot of these companies now new companies are starting and they're growing to a lot larger sizes with smaller teams. But a lot of these companies now.
Don't take our next topic here, Brandon.
No, well, it's not like these existing companies are just shrinking their total headcount, right? They're switching where people are going and where that headcount is going. And, I mean, man, if you guys have an answer on how to scale go-to-market without just hiring a bunch of SDRs and AEs, man, I'd love to hear it. Like, we're going through that right now, trying to restructure our go-to-market team. And, yeah, man, it's not easy when you've been built for one thing and now you're having to switch it. So if you guys have the answer,
I know.
please.
I think of it like it's like there's been a new way to build walls, right? And what I feel a lot of companies are doing is they're just like gluing stuff onto their existing walls, as opposed to going through the work of tearing down the walls and rebuilding in a much better way. So, like, Scott, you're our resident operations and efficiency guru. Can orgs really can orgs really have half the headcount, twice the tooling, twice the outcome? Like, is that really possible?
Well, so I'll maybe reference a conversation that Brandon and I had a week and a half ago. He mentioned that he
where were we?
It was in our secret group chat.
Yeah.
The other one.
Yeah, we just gone to an event, and there's a bunch of different teams talking about AI and different tooling. And Brandon mentioned that he has been testing out a product called Delphi, which basically takes his corpus of knowledge, all of the information they have at their company, and matches it with his voice that he's trained his voice on. And so people can come to their website and ask him questions, potentially ask him questions, and they'd be able to hear both his response as well as the actual company information. And I think Jason Lemkin, CEO of SaaStr, he highlighted a tweet maybe a week or two ago where he talked about they've had in 30 days 35,000 conversations where people come to their site, ask questions, have their pitch decks reviewed, kind of as a first pass. And I think that's interesting because, like, when I pitched Jason Lemkin, I remember pretty quickly he looked at my deck for 45 seconds and then nicely said no. And so I'm like, oh, if he could do that quickly, he could probably at least train some principals to some AI to do the same. Look at the numbers, look at the data, whatever. So I definitely feel like these tools are helping us magnify our ability to answer every question. Like, let's say the CEO, I feel like they often have every answer, or at least a lot of the answers. And if we can train a model, if we can train the knowledge base, we can be really consistent. We can be on time and quick and fast. And the answers can be like very high quality. So yeah, I do think that there's a lot of opportunity here. I'm not necessarily a believer that I'm going to be able to run a company as one person. I just don't think I'm capable of that. But I think
I
there's
don't
a
know.
lot to do.
Maybe you don't want to, but I think you hit on something interesting, Scott. Speed, right? The everything is moving so fast, and there is a direct correlation to adding another human and a lack of speed, like decelerating, right? If you think about like meetings you have, every additional person you add over 3 usually creates more noise. So I think these layoffs are a combination of adjusting the fundamental business metrics, like getting way more efficient, because I don't see them slowing down, right? Like they're not laying off people and getting less things done. I think they're finding, maybe they're finding a way to find those individuals who quit quietly. Maybe they're, but I think it's a fundamental restructuring of their P&Ls. But I also think that there's a speed mechanism there where the unfair advantage we have as early stage companies is we can make a decision today and see impact tomorrow. When you get to even 160 people, especially if you're in enterprise sales, like the decisions we were making at eVisit, I was going to be able to see those at soonest in 90 days, but usually it was going to be like 6 to 9 months because of what our sales cycles looked like. So I think there's a bunch of things that are happening. Because again, like Microsoft, Meta, they're not doing less, right?
Yeah, and so I think that kind of guides us into what we want to talk about next, and where we all really want to talk about is that's great that they're doing, like interesting that they're doing the layoffs, right? Sad for the people that are getting laid off, but what does that mean for us now when we're looking at small teams, right? The playbook is shifting. It is no longer who was it? The head of go-to-market for Salesforce, is it? Who he tweeted out that the days of building the 200-person go-to-market team are done, and you could build a 5-person team doing 10 million of ARR, servicing hundreds of customers with like self-serve onboarded AI-assisted reps, AI BDRs, hyper-efficient funnels. Like, how do we, as companies that have started in the recent years, but might not be 100% AI native yet, how do we go back and look at our team and realize, like, how do we make those hard decisions like Brandon was talking about?
Yeah, go ahead, Brett.
You go.
Okay. Well, so one thing that I wanted to highlight that we're doing is we just brought on a service called Mad Kudu. And basically, Mad Kudu helps us take our SDRs and our AEs and our CSMs and identify the things that they're already doing and find ways to do more of those things that they're doing. So, for example, our CSMs, obviously, they do things like QBRs, they engage with champions. But one thing that's really hard for them to do is identify job changes, because a lot of the time our job changers, they go to a new company and then they champion and adopt our product. So I think, at least for me, the first place that I need to understand is like, what's my team actually doing? What are the processes that they're following? And are there ways to automate that? And I think that principle can be practiced and true for AE, SDR, CSM.
How's Mad Kudu working for you?
We are actually just literally like yesterday was our kickoff call. So can't say yet. Maybe in 6 months it'll be like, but I'm pretty optimistic about it.
Is it expensive?
It
You
doesn't
don't have
feel
to give me
expensive.
like specific pricing, but like,
No, it doesn't feel expensive. And actually, I think there's a lot of companies that are kind of in this space, similar but different. There's companies like Gainsight, for example. It's basically automation and account management of your customers. They've been doing that for a long time, but it helps you see and understand and take action.
The question you asked, Zach, around like how do you retool? It starts with the process. Like I used to be people, process, tools was my approach to solving business problems. Do you have the right people? Is the right process in place? And then do you have the tools to enable that process? I think it's actually moving to process, tools, people, right? Because now with the difference between automation and agents is agents can reason. Automation just follows an if-then tree. And so if you
couldn't it even be tools, process, people? Because I mean, a lot of times, like, couldn't the tools come up with a lot of the processes?
It depends on if you're okay changing your processes to fit into the tool you purchase.
Plus, do you guys trust the agent? I mean, like right now, a lot of the time they're like, "Ooh, that was a great idea. Way to go!" And you're like, "No."
Well, the reason I say process, tools, people is if you can identify the process and a tool that can enable that process through AI, then the person becomes the arbiter of quality and accuracy. So you insert the human in the loop, and you're training the tool against the process. So, if you have a process where you consistently post on social media and you've trained a model on your voice and tone and like the topics you're interested in, I don't know that at some point I'll get to a point where I let my digital twin communicate on my behalf without my intervention.
I think that guy would get fired so fast.
Maybe, right? because I'm still getting to the point where I'm looking, like writing copy, and I'm like, okay, I'm not 14, so please don't use the word nerd. Please don't use the words no cap. Like I'm
no heavyweights references.
Yeah, please. So I think again, process tools, people. And so if you're retooling, like, again, it comes back to objectivity. I think so often, I love my people, but if I'm being objective, it becomes really clear really quickly which of them are delivering. Because we had our quarterly planning recently, and I told my team, I'm like, we need to be putting out 10 times the amount of results in each of our roles that we have before. How do you do that? Not the same way we've gotten to where we've gotten. Right?
Can I ask you guys?
Yes, you
like
may.
I am super interested in becoming more efficient as a team. So what are some of the tools that you guys are using that have helped you become more efficient? Scott mentioned one already, and then he mentioned how we've started using Delphi, although I haven't implemented yet. I've been training it and working on it, try to get the voice right, and there's some work there. But what are some other tools that you guys trust and are using to truly become more efficient in your teams?
I'm using clay.com. I'm using N8N. We're using Chief internally right now as we dog.
And what are those doing for you? Like, I'm familiar with Clay and Chief, but
yeah,
what's N8N?
It's like, if you think, all the decisions we should be making in our business is about aggregated data, and a lot of times for speed, we as operators will use our gut. Like, if we have enough context, we can be like, I think this feels right. Clay is a data aggregation tool, meaning like it's a smart spreadsheet. It allows me to use AI to create workflows that identify, like, if this thing is true, go find this information, and if that's accurate, start taking these actions or push it into N8N, and I want the agent to decide X, Y, or Z, and then surface it to me in Slack for a decision, and then execute the decision, right? And so that's why I go back to it's a process, tool, person, workflow. If you can identify the process, like, when this thing happens, what's the next step, right? When someone hits your website, what do you do next with them? And it usually isn't like, reach out to them. It's like, we'll first figure out if they're even someone we want to talk to. If we can identify who they are, like, grab their LinkedIn profile, go pull the company, identify whether or not the company fits our ICP. If they fit our ICP, make sure that their role is a fit for someone we can actually sell to. If not, start serving the person we can sell to retargeting ads. Like, start serving them to warm them up, and or reach out to that person on LinkedIn and ask for a request to this person. So it's informing, it's accelerating the process that normally I'd have an SDR sitting down and doing it one person at a time manually. I can now insert my reasoning and logic of what should happen next, using these agents until that human on the other end of it reaches a point where they're engaged enough. Then I'm like, okay, Michelle, pick up the phone and call them. Like, they are ready to talk to us, not bug the hell out of them until they relent and they're like, fine, I'll give you my time. But so you go from, historically, in like enterprise B2B sales, we do account-based marketing. We're like, hey, here's the top 100 accounts. We're going to focus heavily on these 10. And like, they're going to know who we are. We're going to be everywhere for them. What these tools allow you to do is do account-based marketing at the human level at scale. Like,
that's Clay you're talking about?
it's an entire workflow of which Clay is a piece. But like we're actually building that. This isn't a plug. We're building all that functionality into Chief, so that when Chief identifies that your sales rep's pipeline is low, it can be like, hey, do you want me to start prospecting for you? Do you want me to go out and actually
Yes.
increase the audience and go? And like, of course, the answer is yes, right? And most teams, I think it was last week we talked about. There was or maybe it was in the group chat. There was some company where they posted a job, an AI engineer, and not like it was your entire job is to AIify processes within the company. Most companies may not have the resources to do that, and or like are going to be laggards in this, and so like Chief is designed to help simplify the next step action in a business.
I think what we should do is we should come with a couple of ideas, because I love that for like our next podcast. Is let's come with specific tools that we are using right now and how they're working, and even tools that we've heard of, because I think that's part of the problem. Is like there's just so many things happening right now. I just saw a reel today of someone driving down a freeway in California, and literally it was like 15 billboards that were like AI, 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 right? Like every single billboard was just about how the tech companies are doing AI. It's a matter of like what it is. So I do want to get back to that. I do think we should have a whole segment about that in one of our future podcasts. But I do want to spend 5 minutes talking about the big, beautiful bill, which is how long it would take to like read a 1-sentence summary of it, because this is a founder-friendly tax buffet disguised as policy, right? We've got, R&D expensing, bonus depreciation, deductions, QSBS glow up, higher salt cap. We got lots of stuff in this bill that are helping founders. What stood out to each of you? Scott,
who do I?
Oh, go ahead, Chad.
Who do I send a thank you note to on behalf of all of us?
Yeah, well,
That's what
maybe
I wanna know.
a thank you note for some cases, a thank you note for new founders. So hopefully you didn't start your company on July 3rd. Otherwise, tough.
We've
break.
decided to reincorporate, and I'm just going to start over.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. I mean, the R&D expensing is great, right? Like that never should have changed, and kind of sucked that it did. But it's great that it's back. So that's awesome. QSBS is
Explain
awesome.
that for someone who doesn't know.
Yeah, I mean, you used to be able to expense all of your R&D expenses in a year, like that year. And so it would reduce your earnings and mean you'd have to pay less in taxes. Now, most of us are burning, so we're not paying a whole lot in taxes right now, but those expenses roll over.
What are earnings?
Yeah.
For me,
For the audience, not for me.
earrings. I think you meant ear. Right.
Yeah.
Brett's never had them. That's why.
That's not true. There were 2 quarters in 2021.
Nice.
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah. So,
Go, keep going, Brandon.
I mean, but the QSBS stuff for those that are starting businesses now is awesome, right? Like, instead of having to wait 5 years, you can get some of the benefit in year 3. I think it's 50% in year 3 and 75% in year 4, which is great. It goes up to 15 million, and then it continues to increase. So for those that aren't familiar with QSBS, that's just if you start a business, and there's some regulations around it, and you can go look it all up, right? Like it has to be a certain type of business, but most tech businesses will qualify, and you own that stock for 5 years. When you exit that stock, you don't have to pay capital gains taxes on. It used to be the first 10 million. Now it's going to be the first 15 million that you gain from it. So that's awesome. I mean, I heard the other day that it's going to cost the government. I feel like it was like 12 billion a year in tax revenue, but could lead to 20% more businesses being invested in every single year. Like, because what's happening is a lot of these investors, like, they don't take those non-taxed like gains and then just go hide it in a vault somewhere, right? They reinvest that money. So if you're not having to pay 20% taxes, that's 20% more money that you can go invest in 20% more companies. And so I could see how that could be really beneficial, not just to investor or entrepreneurs like us, but just the whole ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah, and one of the big changes about it is that you no longer have to wait 5 years to get the benefits of that. They grow, over time. So you get a certain percentage at a couple of years, certain percentage at 3 years, and so that way you don't have to wait for 5 years. Because if you sell your company and you've had your stock for 4 years and 300 days, today you get $0 of tax breaks for that. If you waited a couple more days, you would get your first 10 million tax free, which is just like bananas. That
it just means the money's getting recycled faster. Yeah,
exactly.
It's awesome,
and it gives more incentive for people like Chad, who started their company last week, and they're going to sell next week. Like you get some incentive there, and obviously a week is a bit jokey,
but it has been fast. They tease me because that's been fast. But there's one other thing that my first two startups were quick, but there's one other thing I think that's important to know. It's actually more than the initial 10 million. It's also it's the greater of either or. Of basis points. And so you also can, as a founder, if you're in this position, there's a couple of creative ways to do it, to invest into your own company or set valuation at shares, and you can receive up to 10 times your basis value. So, let's suppose that you put in $1 million or $2 or $3 million, you can actually pay no taxes up to 10 times whatever that basis is. So it could actually be significantly more. And most
of us starting a business aren't putting in a couple $1 million, though.
But does that mean? Does that mean this is much better for the VCs then? Because they're the ones who invest and then own the GS stock.
Correct, because they come in at a much higher basis, and so but you can also. So there are some creative ways where founders are literally setting a valuation at a raise, and there's some trade-offs, but they're setting a valuation, converting their shares into the new corp, restarting the clock, and it have a significantly higher tax break when they do exit eventually. So you're talking up to 100 million, 150 million. In many cases, tax-free.
It's interesting to compare what's happening here to the moves that the Republic of Ireland made and the impact that had on their economy. I mean, if you look at Ireland as a country, 5 decades ago, it was economically extremely depressed, right? Like very, very hard spot. The changes they made to attract businesses from a corporate tax perspective has turned the Republic of Ireland into it's a boon for them, right? Like it is if you've been there, it's incredible. The Google's headquarters, Meta, a lot of those companies offshored there for the tax benefits. This is different, right? This isn't attracting enterprise corporations to the US. It's incentivizing business creation and innovation.
Yeah.
I think the long-term impact, whether or not you like the current, what's the word I'm looking for?
Administration.
Thank you, administration. What it should do, the impact it should have long-term, is really beneficial, right? It should incentivize more business creation, stimulate more venture capital investment. Chad's right. There are ways to create much larger basis, especially when you're partnering with venture capital, to have a third-party valuation to increase your basis in a company. Because most of us doing it, we're bootstrapping it initially to get to a point where it's worth investing in. But it's interesting to look at under the guise of what it's going to do for our country long term and the innovation it's going to stimulate. Because you think about going back to the layoffs, what do all these people do? And if you look at history, we all used to create these mini economies where we had an individual skill that we would contribute to a small community at large, whether it was milk or eggs or carpentry or whatever it is. I think it starts to push individuals to develop specific skill sets they can monetize, because there's less and less security in any job,
Yeah, Scott, what do you think? I mean, I've been trying to get you to chime in here on this one for like 14 times now. So here we go. I finally muted everyone else. And Scott, the floor is yours. Tell us all about the big, beautiful bill.
Well, one specific thing that I think, it goes back to what we kind of talked about earlier. Like, there's a scenario where like you don't start the company and you're not the CEO and founder, or you're not one of the founders who gets like early shares, and you don't have those 5 years right off the gate. Like for me, for example, I joined this company. I became CEO after 2 years, but I chose to like buy my shares and hold on to them. And I have to hold for 5 years. And this new one, it's pretty interesting. Like you could buy your shares. It could be 3 years in, and you'd have a percentage of ownership there. So I think that there's a lot of changes that not only help the early founders, executives, the VCs, but also just employees who choose to buy. And that's a scary thing. I have a couple, my two of my brother-in-laws. One of them is another CEO who, he basically bought a company, and now is CEO. I have another brother-in-law who's like essentially CFO of a company who has a lot of shares. And when he went to buy them, he incurred a huge tax event. And then he has to hope that he's going to be able to sell those later. And he's also going to have a tax event. So now it just like makes things much more palatable, I think, across the board for the risk involved, because there's such an immense amount of risk. Like I still think it was crazy that I bought my shares in retrospect, but it's also like I went all in, and we'll see. I'm not sure what other areas you're wanting me to cover.
I was just teasing, but I think that there's the one thing that I was like really sad isn't in this is like sales tax nexus. It's like it is such a state by state, county by county, city by city dumpster fire for B2B SaaS companies. It is so old school. Like, can someone please fix nexus? And like it seems ridiculous to me that if I have an employee who moves to a different state, now all of a sudden I have to start charging tens of thousands of dollars of sales tax. Like, I think stuff like that is just like so dumb. Anyway, I wish there was something in there about that, but maybe in the next big beautiful bill that will hopefully never come. But all right, we've had a good chat today, whether we're talking about like tech trimming headcount, founders trimming go-to-market, and the IRS being your next big investor. So if you like this episode, if it hit home, drop us a 5-star review, hit subscribe, share with a founder. Yeah.